Recording. Fantastic. Okay, once again, very good morning to you all. Business strategy module here at LSBR. I am just going to start the presentation and also share my screen with you all. So you should hopefully be able to see the slides in just a minute. Right, hopefully everybody can now see the PowerPoint that I am presenting. If anyone is having issues, please just shout out and we'll see if we can fix them. So as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, this module is all about providing you with an introduction to what is strategic management, why do we worry ourselves with strategy, and secondly, providing you with some tools that are useful for organizational analysis. Now these will be split down into 3 levels. We'll be looking at the short, medium and long-term future of an organization and how strategy can vary or how strategic approaches can be altered across those different time scales or horizons. So, introduction then, what we're going to be doing over the next few lectures. So this, in total, there'll be 3 lectures on this module, this block. So this is lecture number 1. What we'll be exploring predominantly is a series of tools that can assist you in unlocking strategic growth for any business of any size. Okay, so these tools can be used for an SME. They can also be used for a medium-sized enterprise, maybe employing 200-300 people even. And it can be used for a large corporate entity as well, employing thousands of people. Okay, obviously your unit of analysis may be slightly different depending on where you're looking at. You might be looking at a particular subsidiary of a large multinational corporation, or you might just be looking at the whole business when it comes down to the SME. But in either case, these tools are quite universally applied. Okay, there's no real distinction between separate tools for separate situations depending on the size of the business. So as I mentioned already, we're going to be looking at it across what I call the 3 timescales, or the 3 horizons. Horizon 1 is a short term. So that's looking at predominantly the next 6, 12, even 18 months sometimes. It's very much looking at what can you do in the immediate term future that can alter what your business is trying to achieve. These short-term strategies or strategic changes usually tend to be applied where there's been a sudden change in the market. So for example, COVID, the coronavirus restrictions that were brought in, they would have led to businesses having to adopt some sort of serious change. That would very much have been short term. It tends to be a firefighting approach whereby, as I said already, some external variable is impacting your market. You now need to react. You now need to do something to ensure your business can cope, it can survive, it can continue to operate under the restrictions imposed. Okay, so that's very much what kind of timescale horizon we're looking at there. We then have the medium term. Now, medium term tends to be slightly more forward looking. So we're looking here at perhaps anything up to about the 3 to 5 year mark. Okay, so 18 months up to 3 years, potentially 5 years, depending on the horizon outlook taken by your chosen business. Now, with a medium term outlook, it's very much about perhaps realizing that a strategy hasn't quite gone to plan. So for example, a new CEO has joined the business. They have implemented their own vision for the business, and within the next, maybe say 12 to 18 months, they've realized that, okay, this hasn't quite worked. What can we do? This hasn't quite started yielding the correct results. What can we do? What tweaks can we make to try and gain maybe better profits, maybe it's cost reduction, whatever it is, maybe it's efficiency, whatever it is the CEO is trying to achieve. What might happen when the medium term is they may say to themselves, okay, we need to make changes here. How can we tweak the system ever so slightly so that over the next 2, 3, 4 years, we start to generate the types of results we want, okay? So that's a medium-term outlook. And finally, we have the long-term. Now, long-term outlook, really, there is no prescriptive time limit, but generally speaking, it's anything above and beyond 5 years. It could be a 5-year plan, 10, 20, 30. You don't tend to get, unless you're a small SME and you're going to own the business for the rest of your life, you don't really tend to get long-term 30-year plans in corporate businesses. It tends to be 5 to 10 year in the context of a large corporation. So for example, Apple, Microsoft, Google, etc., their CEOs will probably set a 5 to 10 year outlook for their business. Now, again, these decisions are very much made at the boardroom level. Okay, these are long-term strategic outlooks. that are generated by marketing directors, by finance directors, by CEOs, chief technology officers. These are very much board level discussions held by the most senior people in the organization. And the fundamental purpose here is to say, okay, what might the future look like? How can we as a business cope with the changes that are coming our way? Now, those changes could be potential technology changes, potential societal changes, demographic changes. So it's very much forward looking. And unfortunately, with the nature of long-term strategic decision making, you're very much playing with an uncertain or an ambiguous picture. It's difficult to know what the context is that you're dealing with. You can't really say in 5 years' time, this is how the world will look. I'll give you a pertinent example of that. For example, if you were a business or a strategic manager dealing with making strategy, say 4 or 5 years ago, could you have envisaged that in 5 years' time, COVID was going to come and it was going to change, the way people lived for at least two years, 3 years, maybe longer? So again, there's certain elements that will always be interruptive, that will always, emerge that you could never ever predict. However, the whole fundamental purpose of long-term strategic planning is trying to predict what the market might look like in 5, 10 years' time and how you want your business to serve that market. Okay. I think there's a question. Simona, yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Oh, sorry, by mistake I put that hand because it's first time when I'm in.
Not a problem at all. Yep. So if anyone wants to ask a question, so I don't know if anyone can see Simona's hand as well, but Simona's raised her hand virtually. That's
just I say hello to everybody and nice to meet you.
That's great. Thank you,
and
Simona.
I'm happy and enjoy with you.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad. But yes, if you need to ask a question, that's the best way to do it. I'm just going to put your hand down now, Simona, okay? But yes, if you need to ask me a question, please do raise your hand. Okay, coming back then to what we're talking about. So those were the 3 horizons that we're going to cover over the next 2 or 3 lectures. We also have what are called assumptions. Now, for assumptions, what I'm trying to say is with this type of class, it's sometimes easy for you to think about it by making a few assumptions, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to assume that you have an idea for a new business or that you're already trading, okay? So think of yourself as a business owner. Think that you have a business plan, okay? And the purpose of your business is to grow. Again, the reason I'm saying this is because you can have lots of different fundamental purposes. Your purpose might be to de-size, downsize. It might be to raise profit. It might be to cut costs, etc. But let's, for the sake of consistency in our discussions, let's assume that we all have a business and our fundamental driver is trying to achieve growth. So growth in profits, growth in sales, that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. And finally, I want you to have an open mind to new ideas and new ways of thinking strategically, even if that means re-examining what we call the old norms and truths. What do I mean by that? I want you to, depending on the models I'm going to cover with you, I want you to kind of have a fresh outlook with each model. I don't want you to take forward the same ideas, the same thoughts that we'll go through, okay? Because for me, the best way for you to understand these models is to actually apply them by yourself. So if everyone could have a couple of ideas, maybe in the next minute or two, thinking about a business, any business at all. You might already have aspirations to have your own business in the future. So think about that business idea. Come up with a very, very short general business plan in your head in terms of how you want to achieve growth. And what I will do with you over the next few lectures is give you techniques, tools, analysis forms that can allow you to build a better picture. Okay. So let's start with thinking about growth and why is growth important. So you tend to find that with any organization, in order to survive, in order to thrive, you need to be having consistent levels of growth. Okay, that's not to say you can't grow, that you need to grow at the same rate every single year. That's not going to be possible. Okay, so if you think about organizations like Apple, or you think of organizations like even Tesla with electric cars, now they've had some years they've had fundamentally exponential growth, whereby they've grown by thousands of percent. Other years they've only grown by 10%, 20%. So growth doesn't mean the same rate every single year, but growth means consistently growing. Okay, not standing still. It's about making sure that you're constantly evolving, constantly innovating, constantly changing, so that you're meeting the needs of tomorrow's customer. And I think that's really what I'm trying to say on this slide, because otherwise what tends to happen is you find yourself being squeezed out within your own market space. If Apple didn't alter the iPhone, if Apple didn't, build in new features, build in new designs, build in new interfaces, they would have lost the smartphone market. Okay, Apple were credited with coming up with the first smartphone. Everyone wanted the iPhone, but imagine if Apple just stopped there and didn't really innovate with their technology. They didn't really change with the times. I mean, I don't think very many of us would have an iPhone today. Okay, so thinking about the need to constantly innovate, constantly evolve, constantly change. And you can grow your business. You will be able to unlock new opportunities. So again, you end up finding there's new opportunities for you to maybe partner with other organizations to maybe come up with new styles of products, new designs of products that can meet what's called an unmet or unfulfilled need. So for example, right now, my mobile phone, I can do pretty much anything that I need to do on it. But what if, say, I want my mobile phone, this is ridiculous, but say I want my mobile phone to make me a cup of coffee. At this moment in time, as far as I'm aware, there's no mobile phone that will physically walk into the kitchen and make you a cup of tea. But imagine if you could do that, okay? Imagine you could come up with a way to get your mobile phone to order you a coffee and have it delivered to your hand without you needing to do that. That's you meeting what's called an unfulfilled need, okay? So unlocking new opportunities. Sorry, could I just ask everyone to go into mute, please? Thank you. Okay, bringing in more clients. So again, if you're growing as a business, you tend to be attracting more businesses, more clients, more customers. So that's part of your growth. And finally, if you're doing that, by default, you'll be increasing the profit. Okay, so the bottom line is you want to make more profit as a business. That's why a business exists. It exists to make a profit as well as do other things. Okay, so these are the reasons why you should pursue a growth strategy. Anyway, coming back to our content. Now looking at strategy, okay, so why is strategy important? So firstly, what does it involve? It's all about making decisions about what actions your business intends to take in order to become more successful. So really that's why we strategize, okay? At the fundamental level, we strategize to make our business more successful. How often do you strategize? Well, again, there's no prescriptive limit. I've seen businesses that have quarterly strategic meetings where they look at maybe tweaking the plan, looking at how the plan can be made better. I've had businesses that do it semi-annually, that do it twice a year, every 6 months. Businesses that do it every year, okay? So at the very, very least, your senior management team, your senior directors, senior managers should be meeting every 12 months to assess how successful the strategy implementation, the strategy realization has been. Okay, so that's really important, because strategy isn't something you just do once then leave it. It's something you have to constantly monitor. You have to tweak. You have to make small changes. You have to react to what's going on. Okay, so think about the point I was making earlier with COVID. If you set a strategy in 2018 for the next 5 years and thought, okay, that's it, we've set a strategy 5 years, let's just leave it, you would run into problems in 2020, because COVID would happen, the market would change, and all of a sudden, maybe your strategy is no longer applicable. It's been made redundant. How does your business cope? If you're taking a hands-off approach, if you're not meeting your management team, you're not making changes, then your strategy is going to fail, and ultimately your business will probably fail as well. Okay, so strategy is something that it's a continuous process. Year on year, month on month, quarter on quarter, 6 months on 6 months, you will meet with your senior management team and you will discuss what the performance has been to that strategy. How has it maybe been accepted by your staff? What's worked, what's not worked? What can you do to make it better? Okay. Beyond that, strategic planning, it's more of a formalized process, okay? And what do I mean by a formalized process? Well, it's all about analyzing your business's current situation. It's about understanding what is your business looking to achieve? What is your business currently doing? Is it on track to achieve what it wants to achieve? It's about setting priorities and objectives. So it's about you as a strategic manager or a senior manager in your business saying, okay, at the fundamental, what are the top 3 things we need to achieve? And then turning that into a strategy or turning that into a plan. Okay, it's about setting objectives, setting priorities that you want your business to deliver on. And finally, it's about focusing your resources to achieve your business's competitive advantage. So a couple of things there to focus on. Number one, resources. What do I mean by resources? Well, there can be a lot of things. It can be human resources, so that's your workers. It can be land, so maybe the property or the office or the warehouse that you need to run your business. It can be capital, that's finances. And it can also be raw materials as well. Okay, so maybe it's, if you're in the clothing trade, it might be fabric. If you are in the technology trade, it might be, you know, processors. It might be semiconductors. It might be hardware. You know, it could be. At the end of the day, the raw materials are those things that go into your production. Okay, so you've got to focus your resources to achieve your business's competitive advantage. Now, what's a competitive advantage? Well, it's something that allows your business to stand out. What is it that your business does that makes it different to others that are already in the market? Now, that might not always mean a different product or you know, something that's completely unique in terms of product, but it could be unique in terms of how you do it. Maybe you're able to get a cost advantage. You know, maybe you've got a supplier that halves your costs, which means you can undercut everyone else in the market. Maybe it's because you use sustainable technology. You use stuff that, you know, can be better recycled. It can be, you know, it doesn't have any real waste. Again, that makes you unique. So competitive advantage is anything that makes you unique. It doesn't have to be anything that makes your product different in terms of the deliverables. Your product might still do the exact same thing that my product does, but it might do it in a better way, or it might do it in a more sustainable way. It might do it so that it's cheaper than what I sell mine for. So it's thinking about how do you stand out. Okay, so it's focusing your resources to achieve that competitive advantage. But fundamentally, where we see businesses failing is when they don't understand how important strategic planning is. Okay, you can have the best business idea in the world. You know, you could come up with something that's never ever been done before, you know, that would meet the needs of every single person on this planet. But if you don't have a strategy for how you're going to grow that business, how you're going to tackle the specific markets, how you're going to reach the customer, how you're going to plan your production process, how you're going to deliver the product to your customers, what's your logistics, what's your supply chain. If you don't have that level of strategic planning, your business will fail. Okay. So strategic planning is important no matter what size your business is. If you're a one-man business starting off, or if you're a 100,000-man company, you know, taking over the world, you need to have some element of strategic planning so that you know what you're looking to do. And there are 5 key reasons to be strategic when pursuing a growth strategy. I'm just about to tell you what those reasons are. Number 1, your business will be proactive rather than reactive. So again, if you remember to the example I gave you about COVID came in, businesses had to react. Now, there's a reason for that, because no one could have really predicted it. No one really knew we were going to get an epidemic, you know, a global pandemic that was going to almost bring the whole world to a standstill. But that was reactive, okay? That was businesses reacting to what was going on. In an ideal world, you would want your strategy to be proactive. Why? Because being proactive allows you to keep up with changing trends in your market, and it allows you to stay one step ahead of your competition. Now, again, that's not to say you should hire a psychic who can guess what's going to happen in the future, but it's about constantly analysing. It's about understanding what are the key drivers in the market. Why are people behaving this way? What is going on? So, for example, after the pandemic in the UK, house prices went very, very high. Why did house prices go high? Well, for a short time, everything was closed. There was a lot of built up demand. People were not going out, they were saving money, they had more disposable income, they had more savings, so people had more money to spend. And there's people already on looking for houses before the restrictions were imposed. So when the restrictions were lifted and people were allowed to buy houses, the demand went up. The supply of houses stayed relatively stable, actually fell. People weren't willing to move because they were scared of moving in the pandemic. So supply was low, but demand was high. And what happens when that situation occurs? The prices jump, okay? So if you are being strategic, you could potentially have sold your house at the peak of the pandemic because you would have got a better price. If you had bought your house in 2018 for example, £200,000, given the percentage rise, your house could have been worth £240,000, £250,000 by 2020 when the pandemic hit, because, as I said, the prices jumped. So you could have made a profit on your house had you sold it in the UK during the pandemic. Okay, so that's about being proactive with your strategy. It's about thinking what's going on in the market, what can I do? Now, I'm not saying selling your house is a business, but I'm trying to give you an example of planning ahead, of thinking about, okay, what's going on in the world? What do I need to do to react? Or what can I do to proactively manage what's going on so that I can achieve better things for my business, so I can stay ahead of the competition. Now, obviously, if you could predict the pandemic, you might decide my business is going to start making masks, or my business is going to start making PPE, protective equipment. These are sorts of things that were very much in demand when the pandemic hit. Okay. Number 2, give your business a sense of direction. Now, this is very, very important. How many times have you worked for a business where you thought, okay, I'm here, I know what we're doing today, but I don't really know what it is the business is trying to achieve, or I don't really understand why I'm here, or what my purpose in the organization is. If that's happened, then it's probably because the business you worked for didn't really have a solid direction for which vision or what mission or what objective they were looking to achieve. Okay. So giving your business a sense of direction allows you to kind of establish sensible goals. It allows your workers to understand what it is you're working towards. Now, that's important because if they don't know that, then they will just go about doing things how they best see fit. But if they know there's a specific strategy or a specific goal that you're trying to achieve, then they can adapt what they're doing. They can make sure that their behavior, that their labor, that their way of working reflects on what your business is looking to achieve. Secondly, strategy gives you what's called a foundation from which to grow and evaluate your success. What I mean by that is it gives you a blueprint, okay? Strategy is like a plan. Now, as always, plans don't always go to plan, excuse the pun. If plans are something that you set out so that you know that here is what you're going to try and achieve. There may be elements of things that change. There may be elements where the market behaves differently, or the thing you wanted to do is no longer achievable, or the business hasn't got the capital today to invest in the things you want to invest in. So there always can be changes to the plan, but the plan is the blueprint, okay? It's the foundation from which you will look to build what your business is doing for the next 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe beyond years, okay? And thirdly, it increases efficiency. So what do you mean by that? Well, strategic thinking aligns your chosen functional activities with your broader goals. So again, I'll break down that statement. Functional activities tend to be areas of your business. So for example, sales, marketing, production, logistics, these are functional areas of a business. So you can align your functional activities with broader goals. So for example, you tend to find that people that work in marketing probably don't care too much what people are doing in production or people are doing in supply chain or logistics, because in marketing, my job is to sell the product. I'm here to market the product, get demand, get people buying it. However, there could be a problem in supply chain. It could be that, for example, the issue with the Suez Canal where the big container ship got stuck. Now, the people in supply chain might be worried because they're scared that the stock won't arrive on time because there's been an issue in the Suez Canal. We can't get the raw materials into the plant. We can't get raw materials into the warehouse. We can't make products because we don't have the stock yet coming into our warehouse. So they've got a problem. But if marketing don't know that, then you've got a fundamental problem, okay? Because marketing always keep aggressively pushing the sales. They'll be like, yes, we're achieving sales. We're doing something good. But in hindsight, they might be causing a problem because the business can't deliver on those sales because they don't have the stock or they don't have the raw materials to make the product. So thinking about aligning the functional activities means that there is communication, there's efficiency, everybody knows what's going on in the business. Strategy is important in doing that because if you're strategizing, you're making changes constantly, you're identifying where the business needs to go, then automatically you're making sure your people are kept in the loop. Secondly, it guides you in working out your resource and budget requirements. Now, here we're talking about understanding what you're going to do, where you're going to invest, what resources you're going to use, and how you can then accomplish your objectives, okay? So again, it's about planning ahead. It's about saying, in 3 months' time, I'm going to need 50 more staff because it's almost Christmas time. our demand goes up at Christmas, we don't have enough workers to deliver on that demand. That's an example of strategic planning, okay? And that's a very, very simple example, but that's what I'm trying to say. Strategic planning allows you to be more efficient, it allows you to predict what you need to do, it allows you to create plans, it allows you to set in stone some of the blueprints, some of the plans that can allow you to deliver success for your business. Number 4, it's all about increasing market share and profitability. So I've said this already, but the fundamental purpose of any private, or even in some cases public limited companies, is to make profit. That's all they care about. I mean, yes, they want to make sure they're delivering a product. Yes, they want to make sure they're paying their staff. We know that's important too. But if they're not making a profit, then nothing else matters, because the profit is what keeps the business going. So how do you make sure that you're constantly profitable? Well, it's about creating or unlocking valuable insights on market trends. It's about identifying client segments or customer segments and being able to adapt to your service offering. It's about making sure that what you're doing today, now, here, is relevant to your customer, okay? So I'll give you an example again. Say you joined the smartphone market and you were providing smartphones, but your smartphone only had a camera, this phone function, and limited internet. You know, maybe you were still using 2G or 3G network. Now, you might say, I'm selling mobile phones. People like to buy mobile phones. That's true, they do. But the mobile phone that you're selling is no longer the latest technology. It's no longer something customers want, okay? So it's about being able to identify, what do customers want? What is the service offering that's currently there already? What are customers looking for? What do my client segments need from me? What are the trends on the market, okay? So nowadays it's all about 5G, it's all about latest technology, it's all about having the best cameras on your phone, it's all about, you know, screen size. These are all things that are important. It's no longer just about making phone calls or text messages. One of the approaches that is targeted helps translate your efforts into the best possible returns on investment. So what do you mean by that? Strategy isn't cheap, okay? Particularly in large organizations. Okay, if you're a small business, but then again, if you're a small business, you don't have a lot of capital, so it can be difficult for small businesses too. You want to make sure that if you're going to be investing money to make changes, that you get a return on your investment, okay? So if you're investing, say, for example, £100,000 on improving your IT infrastructure so that, you know, everything is more digital, everything is more efficient, everything is quicker, then you would expect that to result in increased efficiency. You would expect processes to run quicker. You would expect customers to be using your online platform, you know, your digital platform. So if that's not happening, then that £100,000 that you've just spent could be seen as a waste, okay? So you need to make sure that the money that you're investing creates some kind of positive return for your business. And number 5, it's all about making your business more durable. So what do you mean by that? It's about ensuring that your business continues to thrive. Unfortunately, what can happen is a business can flourish in one year and then struggle the next. That happens quite often. You would be surprised. You know, business suddenly grows, it grows exponentially, it grows, you know, 100%, 200%. All of a sudden, the small business owner is out of his depth. They don't know how to react, they don't know, or they haven't made the necessary arrangements so that their business can continue to grow. And then all of a sudden, they find themselves being inundated with orders, they don't have enough materials, they run into cash flow problems because they're selling on credit and now they don't have money to buy new stock to meet the demand. These are all problems, okay? So it's all about making sure you're staying one step ahead. Strategic planning is all about ensuring that you are making changes, you're identifying what's going on, and you're able to stay ahead of the market, okay? Businesses that lack a strong foundation will tend to have a trouble riding the waves. What do you mean by that? Well, if you don't have a blueprint, if you don't have a plan that you're working towards, then when something goes wrong, your business will be reactive. You'll be too busy trying to battle the flames. You'll be too busy trying to react to what's happened, as opposed to having a plan, having something that you can then tweak or change so that, you know, you're still on track to achieve what you want to achieve. And finally, the odds of survival are always in favor of those businesses that have a strong strategic plan. That's not my view, that is fact, okay? If you look into textbooks, if you look at anywhere at all you look, businesses that have a strategic plan, that have some sort of understanding, are more likely to survive than businesses that don't, okay? It's just common sense more than anything else. So yeah, just a couple of things for you to bear in mind as to why strategy is important. So I've talked about why strategy is important and how it can help your business survive or thrive, but we've not answered what is strategy. So before I take you through one of these definitions and explain what I'm trying to suggest here, I'm going to open up the floor. So feel free to either come off mute and talk to me, or feel free to put something in the chat function if you want to enter some text in the chat function. But tell me, what do you think strategy is? What is strategy? After listening to me talk for almost half an hour, what do you believe strategy is, and what's the role of strategy?
Hello.
Hello there, yes.
Yeah, I'm Kwesi. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yes. Have you got an answer for me? What you think strategy is?
Oh, I think its strategy is in a nutshell, it's a plan to achieve a long-term goal. I mean, plan of action, directions that helps to achieve an objective in the long run.
Yep, perfect. That sounds really good. So it's a plan to achieve some sort of long-term or long-run objective. Yeah, very good. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? If not,
Hello.
Hello, yes.
Yeah, hi. For me, strategy encompasses a plan for organization, which includes a detailed, detailed organizational resources to meeting a targeted goal for a fixed term. So similar to what Kwesi has said and what the definition says, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You're 100% right. It's about how do you create a plan? How do you create a blueprint for managing your resources, for allocating your resources to achieve a particular goal or a particular objective in a set time frame? 100%. That's a very good answer. Okay, I think somebody has given me an answer in the chat function. Let me just read. So somebody's saying here, strategy is planning how to do or achieve something. It further results to strategic planning. Yeah, absolutely. So strategic planning is perhaps the front end, and strategy itself is what you're delivering. So yeah, very good distinction there, Shreya. Thank you for sharing that with us too. Okay, thank you very much, guys, for sharing some of your thoughts and your perspectives. So I've defined. Oh, just one more chat coming through. Let me just have a look. Oh, no worries. Thank you, Shreya.
Hello.
Hello there. Yes.
Yes, I think a strategy is the plan of action to achieve the long-term goal, but the strategy has to be, it's a dynamic process. I think I wanted to add dynamic there.
Perfect. That's a really, really good term, actually. Yes, dynamic is a very, very applicable term in this context. So I've been saying already, it's all about making tweaks, it's about making changes, and that's what dynamic means, isn't it? Dynamic means it's a moving picture. It's not about setting a plan today and then sticking to the same plan in 3 years' time. It's about understanding how the market trends will influence or shape what you're doing. So dynamic is a very, very good word to use. Thank you very much. Yes, coming back then to the slide, guys. Again, thank you for those that shared their thoughts. I've used a quote here from a fairly prominent scholar, or scholars, I should say, in strategy. So if you are looking for a textbook to use, I would seriously recommend looking at this one. So Gary Johnson, Kevin Scholes, and Richard Whittington. The 2008 version is the more recent version. There's also a 2004 version of the book. That's what I use for the quotes, but you can get the 8th edition. I think there may also be a 9th edition, maybe 2017 or 2018. But either way, any version, well, as long as you use 5th or 6th version onwards, it's all relevant. But they define strategy as the direction and scope of an organization over the long term, which achieves advantage for the organization through its configuration of resources within a changing environment and to fulfill stakeholder expectations. So quite a loaded definition for what they think strategy is, but I think it hits home on lots of the key points that you all made on the call earlier on. So it's about direction and scope. So it's about making sure you set a vision, set an objective. It's about setting that path for your people to follow over the long term. So again, yes, strategy can be done short, medium, and long term, but the idea with strategy or strategic thinking is, how is your business going to survive? Okay, you're always thinking about the future. It's always about the longer term. How will what you do today influence what your business is able to do tomorrow? Which achieves advantage for the organization. So remember, competitive advantage, we talked about it earlier. How do you have something that's unique, or USP, or an advantage that makes you stand out? Through its configuration of resources. So again, some of you mentioned it on the call, it's about your unique bundle of resources, your land, your labor, your capital, your enterprise, your materials, etc., within a changing environment. So that's important, okay? The environment is never, ever consistent. One of my professors at university used to always say, you can never step in the same river stream twice. Okay, now what did he mean by that? Because water's always flowing, isn't it? Water's always moving. If I step into a river right now with my right foot, I stepped in it once, I will never step in that same bit of river ever again, because that water's flowed, it's gone. My next step that I take will be on a different bit of water. The water will have changed. It might have got faster, it might have got slower, it might have changed direction, but the fundamental purpose of what we're trying to say here is the environment has changed, okay? And the same thing applies for the market, the same thing applies for the real world. It's constantly changing. The environment is never stabilized, it's always moving, it's always something that's evolving, something that's dynamic, something that requires constant attention. And finally, this is something we've not spoke about yet, to fulfill stakeholder expectations. Now, that's quite important, okay? Why is that important? Because your stakeholders are the ones that make your business work. And it's not just your employees, it's not just your managers or your senior directors or even your shareholders. It can also be the community, it can be your customers, it can be your suppliers, it can be the local government. These are all important stakeholders. If you're not abiding by the regulations or the laws of a country, then that government can stop you practicing, it can stop you operating your business in that country. They're an important stakeholder. If you're not, or if your products are no longer meeting the needs of the market or the customer, then you're not fulfilling their expectations, and therefore your business will fail. If you're not looking after your workers, or you're not providing your workers with a fair pay, good working conditions, then they're probably not as likely to work hard for you. They're not likely to, want to go the extra mile and do that little bit extra for you. They're not going to deliver perhaps the same level of work or commitment that you would expect. Okay, so fulfilling stakeholder expectations is also a key part of what strategy is. So as you can see, strategy is a lot of different things. From that one definition alone, it's not just one thing, it's about encompassing all of these factors and trying to turn them into success for your business. Right, so let's break this down further. These are what we call the components of strategic management. So there's 3 core components. Let's start with strategic analysis. So what is strategic analysis? It's all about understanding the firm's strategic position. How do you do that? You look at what's happening in the external environment. So remember, the external environment is that is outside of your business. So it's about the market, it's about other companies, it's about the government, it's about climate change. These are all factors that are outside of your control. As a business or as a senior manager or a strategy consultant, you don't have power to control what the government's doing. You don't have power to control what your competitors are doing or what the market is doing directly. You can't really control that. That's external, okay? It's also about your internal resources and competencies. Now, these are things you can control, okay? These are things that belong to your business. You own the assets, you own the resources, you have the competencies. If anyone's not sure what competence is basically processes, ways of working, things that are unique to how your business operates. Okay, that's a competence. So it's seen as something that's being good, something that's being positive, something that belongs to you. So you might have a particular way of, I don't know, making a product. You might have a particular way of, you know, being able to turn a product into something else quicker or cheaper. That's a competence. Okay. And finally, stakeholders. Stakeholders are also important as part of your analysis. You need to understand who your stakeholders are, what are they interested in, what do they want from you. So that's the analysis component. We also have what's called strategic choices. Now, for strategic choices, we're very much looking at understanding what are called the underlying bases or the guiding future strategy. So what is it that are the trigger points? What is it that we need to be aware of that can allow us to achieve? So this is basically identifying drivers, identifying enablers, or identifying things that allow you to deliver on your strategy. Okay, so the kind of the foundation level of your strategy. So by making sure that you have what you need in place to deliver on your strategic goals. It's about generating strategic options for evaluation and selection. Now, strategic options, there can be hundreds. As I said already, you can choose what you want your business to do. We were talking about growth. I'm sure each and every one of you on this call today, if I was to ask you to think of a growth strategy or think of a way to achieve growth in your business, there's 101 different ways you'd all come up with. Okay, there's very, very many different ways. So these are all called strategic options. What you then have to do is choose which one you think is best. Okay, you evaluate the options you come up with, you think about how these would look in practice, how these would influence your business, and then you select the option that you think would best serve the needs of your business. And then finally, we move into what's called strategy implementation. Now, some people argue this is one of the most fundamental stages in strategy. I would argue they all are, but if you're looking at the success or failure of strategy, here is where it tends to fail. Okay, so strategic implementation is all about translating what's on the paper, what's on the blueprint, into action. Okay, so we can sit in an office, locked in a room, come up with the best strategy in the world. You know, we might come up with something that's really, really good. It might transform the business, but if we can't implement that, if we can't turn that into practice, then it's failed. Okay. And what influences implementation? It's firm structure and design. Okay. Depending on the style of your organization, the hierarchy, the organizational culture, that will all influence how successful your strategy implementation is. Your resource planning, do you have the resources to be able to make that change? So if you're going to perhaps move from face-to-face to digital and technology-based, service provision, do you have the capital, firstly, to invest in the IT infrastructure? Do you have the people that understand technology and know how technology works and can make it come true? Do you have the necessary land? Do you have warehouses? Do you have servers? Do you have the IT equipment that's required to deliver such a change? So again, these are all things that are important. Okay, so resource planning is very important when it comes to strategy implementation. And finally, strategic change management. Now, this is a very fuzzy term because there's no real one way to explain what strategic change management is. But change management is basically when you acknowledge that what you're doing is going to change what's happening in the organization, but you need to take your people with you on that journey. Okay. And that can be the most difficult part, because I'm sure you all have experienced this if you've worked before. You get into a job, you learn how to do something, you become an expert at it, you do it in a particular way, and that's it. That becomes your bread and butter. That's something inside out. You're an expert, you're the best person to be doing that job. Then all of a sudden, strategy changes. The business wants to try something new. Some senior manager comes and says, okay, tomorrow we are going to change to this. All of a sudden, you feel like the earth has been pulled out from under your feet. Okay, because all of a sudden, everything you knew, everything you've been working for, everything you've been doing for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years is going to change. People's reaction to that change, people's feelings, people's emotions are usually the most difficult or biggest barrier to change. Okay, now you might think, how difficult can it be? We've come up with the strategy, we've got the money, we've got everything ready. Why are people causing the problem? Well, people are the ones that are going to deliver on the strategy. So if you can't take your people, your employees on that journey with you, then your strategy is going to fail. Okay, so change or strategic change management is about making sure that you're getting your people ready, you're upskilling them, you're giving them training, or you're answering any questions or fears they might have, you're giving them time to understand. Whereas if you don't do that, then your strategy can fall flat on its face. Okay, so these are some of the kind of what we call the components of strategic management. Then we also have stages. So again, we've talked about some of these already, so I won't go into too much detail, but at the very, very start, you think about the mission, the objective, what are we going to do? Where are we now? Where do we want to go? Then we look at an internal and external analysis. We look at, what do we have internally that can allow us to change? What is going on externally? What's happening in the market? How can our business change to deliver on the objectives, on the mission? Then we have what's called SWOT and PESTEL analysis. Don't worry, I'm going to take you through a SWOT and a PESTEL. I'm sure you've all familiar, or you've heard of these at least maybe, but don't worry, I'm going to explain them in more detail over the coming slides. Once you've carried out your SWOT and PESTEL analysis, you will then reevaluate your mission. You'll see, does my mission still apply? Has the business environment changed? Has my analysis identified something different? Is my mission still applicable? Once you've done that, you will then identify your strategic options, which we talked about already. So these are all the different ways in which you think you can achieve some goal or objective. So option 1, option 2, option 3, number of different options. Once you've identified those options, you then look at evaluating them. You start thinking about which of these options is best for my business, which of these is costly in terms of, are they too expensive? Which of these would take the longest or shortest time to implement? These are all things that you might want to consider when you're looking at your strategic options. Which of these are options that I can implement perhaps without too much cost, without too much hassle? Then you move into what's called the operational objectives. So now it's not about long-term strategy objectives, it's about how do your operations functions need to work. Operational objectives tend to be very, very short term. Okay, you're looking at perhaps 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. It's about how does the people that work in marketing need to change? How do the people that work in production need to change? How do people that work in logistics or supply chain? So these are what were called operational objectives. Okay, each operations area will need to then set their own objectives that meet the bigger, wider business objective. They then set what are called tactical plans. Now, tactical plans are very much team level. So within marketing, you might have a specific team that deals with high network clients. You might have a specific team that deals with overseas clients. You might have a specific team that deals with schools or education. For example, if you sell a product that's sold to education. So again, thinking about those individual teams, this is when you start getting into the kind of minute detail. The technical or the tactical plan, it's very much looking at individual teams, the individual departments, what's their job. And finally, you control. So what do you mean by control? Control doesn't mean you're there for every single step, you're making sure everything is working right. It's about making sure that you're monitoring, you're evaluating, you're constantly looking at the progress, the performance. Okay, so the strategy has been in place now for, 2-3 weeks, coming towards the end of the month. Yes, you might not get the full benefits, things take time, but are you seeing any improvements? Are things going, roughly to plan? Has anything gone wrong? Has something maybe not been implemented correctly? Has something been discovered in the implementation that now needs further changing? So control is very, very important. Okay, it's about making sure that your business is still on course on delivering that change. And those are some of the stages involved in strategic planning. So the Horizon Plan. Now, I've talked about the Horizon Plan already very, very briefly when I mentioned the short, medium, and long term. So basically, the Horizon Plan is a good starting point for a discussion about strategic growth. Why? Because in some ways, it's actually a framework. It's like what we call a coat hanger for other strategic tools. It's something that we can base or we can throw a discussion on, okay? So the framework envisions what we call 3 horizons. Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3. Now, these provide a structure for the business to assess opportunities for growth. without neglecting present performance. So what do I mean by that? Let me just show you. So this is the horizons. Horizon 1 very much is your short term. So if you look at the bottom axis, it's all about time. So Horizon 1 is short term. The focus with short term strategy always is the core business. So what is the core business? The core business is what our business is doing, what we can change today. What is our internal performance like? What is our internal position like? What can we do to change the core of our business? So that's short-term goals, Horizon 1. Horizon 2 is more medium term. And with the medium term, we're focusing on what's called the emerging business. Now, emerging business is something that we could be, okay? Now that's something difficult to get your head around. So it's about saying, here's where we are today, here's what we're doing, this is our core business. But in 2 or 3 years' time, new technology is going to come out, which is going to make it easy for us to operate digitally or operate, differently. Maybe augmented reality, maybe virtual reality, I don't know, could be anything. The idea though is with the medium term, with Horizon 2, you're focusing on how do you need to change your business so that your business model is more suitable to what's called the emerging business, okay? So what you might be, what you might become. So that's the emerging business. And finally, Horizon 3 is long-term outlook. Now here is what we almost call creating a new business. And the reason we say that is in 5 to 10 years' time, your business model, your way of working, your fundamental product or service will have changed. If you think it won't, then either your product is already dead and you don't understand, or you've come up with something that's equivalent of water. Okay, water is the only thing that's never changed. It's always been the same. Water is water. There's always going to be something new that happens. So again, if we go back to the mobile phone market, if Apple had said, this first iPhone or the second iPhone, this is it, this is the best phone in the market, this is amazing, this is the height of technology, nothing else is going to change, then Apple would fundamentally have failed. Okay, they wouldn't have been here today. They would have failed because, as I said already, mobile phones have changed so much since the very first smartphone. Okay, so understanding the different layers, so you almost end up coming up with a new business plan. You end up coming with a new way of doing business in the long term that meets the needs of the customers of the future. Does that make sense to everyone, the Horizon plan? Anyone got any questions on this? No? Okay. I can also see we're approaching 11 o'clock. So what we'll do is we will take a quick break. The time I make is 10:58. Let's aim to be back for 11:05. Okay, 11:05 UK time. So 7 minutes from now, let's aim to be back. So quick 5-10 minute break. Okay, aim to be back at 11:05. Thank you, everyone. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I make that 11:05 on my watch. Hopefully you all had a chance to stretch your legs and get going. Okay, so next stage then is thinking about horizon plan and saying, you know, what do we do with it? And I guess that we've talked about this already. So the core business is all about protecting. Okay, so short-term strategy tends to be reactive. It's all about making sure your business is adapted or changed to cope with what's going on. Horizon 2, it's about unlocking emerging business opportunities. It's about identifying, you know, what could generate profit for you in the medium-term future. In 3 to 5 years, what might be different? How can we make profit? How can we make money from a business idea? And finally, Horizon 3, which is all about looking at new business opportunities. Okay, so it's about creating what's called genuinely new businesses. So it's about brand new ideas. For example, you might carry out research projects, you might have pilots, you might even buy stakes in new and emerging businesses. You tend to find that large corporates, Google, Apple, etc., they tend to buy stakes in new and emerging companies because they want to make sure they're constantly renewing, constantly growing. Okay. They know that they can't always have the best ideas in-house. So by identifying that some new ideas outside might be good, they buy a stake in those companies. So they've got an ownership as well. Okay. Right, so let's move into the tools that we've been talking about. So the strategic tools. Now, the Horizon Plan itself that I just covered is a form of strategic tool. Why? Because it allows you to identify where to fit your strategic goals and objectives. You know, is it about the core business? Is it about the emerging business? Or is it about creating new business opportunities? So in itself, you have a tool that allows you to organize or to categorize your strategic goals and objectives. And I want you to keep that in mind if and when you decide to use the 3 Horizons tool. Okay. So for your assignment, you might decide to, you know, group your recommendations by 3 Horizons. And if you're doing that, you know, just think about how you want to present that, how you want to explain that. But what about the other tools? So some of them can be very focused, and we call them the micro tools. They usually tend to help with Horizon 1. It's all about short-term planning. It's all about what's going on here and now. How can we change, adapt to what's happening in the market? Whereas others tend to be more macro. Okay, now they very much are focused with looking at long-term direction of the business. These are not something you would use for short-term planning. These are very much long-term thinking, you know, medium into long-term strategic goals. Number 1 is the business model canvas. Now, you may have heard of the BMC, or the business model canvas, invented by Alexander Osterwalder and Yves Pinier. Now, it's basically a template, okay? And what it does is it breaks down the key elements or the key functions that are important to your business model. Now, why is that important? Well, firstly, it allows you to describe your model. Now, why is that important? Well, again, when it comes to getting a bank loan, when it comes to trying to get investors to invest in you, you need to be able to explain to them what your business does. If you can't explain your business model, if you can't explain what your business is all about, then no one's going to invest in you. So the business model is a very, very good tool. The BMC, the business model canvas, is a very good tool that allows you to put in your business main objectives, your main drivers, what is making your business work. Now, there's 9 key elements, and I'm going to cover each and every one of them with you, but I need you to be able to, if you're going to do this in your assignment, I need you to be able to discuss each of these elements. I need you to be able to decide how important each of these elements is to your business. And I need you to be able to identify the best strategic tools to then change the resulting BMC. So what do you mean by that? So once you've done your business model canvas, this is what your business looks like today. You might think of the future and say, in the future, this is what I want my business to achieve. So what you can then do is you can then look at the 2 business model canvases and say, what are the tools, what are the strategic objectives, what are the options that we need to implement to get there? Okay, so the BMC can be a good tool to do comparative analysis. It allows you to compare the today to the ideal future, then understand what you want to achieve from it. And here is what it looks like. So the business model canvas, this is quite small, so hopefully you can see what's on the screen, but don't worry, I'm going to break down each of those 9 key elements and explain what they mean. But you may have seen this already, if anyone's done any business classes in the past, or if anyone has come across if you watch Dragon's Den, sometimes some of the entrepreneurs bring in a business model canvas just to showcase at a glance what their business is all about. So the 9 key elements, you've got key partners. Now, key partners are identifying people like suppliers, strategic alliances, people you might have joint ventures with, any exclusive or contractual relationships. It's also important to be clear what your business gains from a key partner that it could not get alone. So a key partner is someone that you need to make your business run. Now that could be a supplier. So say you're sourcing a particular raw material from a specific supplier. Now, if that supplier is the only business in the world that runs or makes that piece or makes that material, then that is a fundamental key partner, okay? Without them, your business would fail because you wouldn't have that raw material. So key partners are those people or those organizations or those firms or those competitors even sometimes that are fundamental to making your business work. You need them. Without them, your business would fail. I'll give an example of one. So if you think of games consoles, so games consoles, you've got Microsoft's Xbox, you've got Sony, PlayStation, Nintendo with their consoles. Now those are the consoles, they're important. If the consoles didn't exist, all these games designers, these Ubisoft and all these different companies that produce video games, they would fail because if Xbox or PlayStation or Nintendo decide to pull all the games consoles and stop making them, then these games designers, these games producers, they're not going to have anywhere to play their games. So that's an example of a key partner, okay? They complement each other. Without each other, they wouldn't really work. Then we have what's called key activities. So key activities are those that your business must perform in order to deliver on the value proposition to your clients. So here we're talking about the activities that go into the value chain of your business. So it can be stuff like service development, service delivery. It's about marketing your products. It's about creating what's called a post-service support. So these are the key things that your business needs to do in order to get the product to your customer. But that's not where it ends. It can even be after sales support. So if you're providing a product, maybe a technical product, you might offer a 1-year warranty or a 2-year warranty. Well, then you need to also offer what's called aftercare or after sales support. Okay. So these are the key activities that are fundamental to your business running. Key resources. Now, these are things that we talked about already, so I'm not going to spend too much time, but it can be people, skills, assets, intellectual property, patents, copyrights, data. These are all examples of what's called resources, okay? They don't have to be physical. They can be intangible as well, electronic, digital. These are all examples of resources held by your business. Value proposition. Now, what is a value proposition? Well, basically, it actually brings together the rest of the elements, the rest of the 8 elements on the business model canvas. The value proposition essentially describes which problems that you as a business are solving or which customer needs you are satisfying. So essentially, it's your unique selling point. It's what makes you as a business stand out. Why is it that a customer should buy from you, basically? Okay, that's your value proposition. We then also have customer relationships. Now, these are what kind of relationships you want to have with your customers. Now, again, they can be a lot of different things. You could have personal relationships, which can almost be, one-to-one. You're dealing with each customer individually. Some businesses are more self-service, whereby customers can buy individual pieces. They can buy things, for example, with IKEA, you buy IKEA furniture, you tend to fix it yourself. It's very much a self-service. Okay, they've started doing, pay for the service and they'll fix it for you. But really, IKEA was an example of self-service, okay? You buy what you want, you put it together in your house, and that's it. You can also be transactional. So transactional is where the relationship is limited to a particular piece of work. This tends to be more contractual. So for example, you are having a new kitchen installed in your house. You have hired a plumber. You have hired tradespeople to come and fix the kitchen. Now that's what's called a transactional relationship. Okay, you're paying them to make your kitchen, to plug in your sinks, to do the drainage, do the piping. That's their job. Once that job is complete, you'll pay them, and that's it. Relationship over. That's called a transactional relationship. However, other times you might have what's called a longer term relationship. Now, this tends to be more likely with suppliers. You tend to have a long-term relationship with suppliers because they'll be constantly providing you with goods and services. but sometimes you can have a long-term relationship with your customers. This tends to be quite true for perishable goods. So for example, foods. Now, if I'm running a large event centre, so for example, say I own the London O2, okay? O2 Centre in London. Okay, there's no concerts at the moment because of COVID, but usually there's concerts, there's always events on. I might have an agreement with a local catering company or with a particular company that provides teas and coffees, and I want them to constantly provide that service every time there's an event on. Well, that's an example of a long-term relationship, okay? Because it's not just one-off, it's something that's going to happen regularly, whereas you're not going to have your kitchen installed on a regular basis, okay? So that's the difference between a transactional relationship and a long-term relationship. And finally, to channels as well. So channels is important. Channels is how do you reach the customer? So what are the ways in which you deliver your services to your customer? You know, whether it be the initial marketing, whether it be the pre-service, you know, maybe someone needs to come out and have a look, do some scoping, understand if the furniture is going to fit through your door. That's an example of pre-service. The service itself, that could be the delivery, and then the post-service, and that's your aftercare or your after-sales support, okay? And then we also have the customer segments. So customer segments are those customers that your business serves, and also those that you don't serve. Now, why is that important? So identifying who you're not serving is quite important because it then allows you to understand, okay, if we're not serving these people, firstly, we've got to make sure our marketing avoids them. But secondly, if we're not serving them today, what could we do tomorrow or in the future to start serving them? Okay, so there's two reasons why you include people that you don't, or customers that you're not serving as part of your customer segment. So you have two sections. You have your customer segment and you have the non-customer segment, or the customers you don't serve. And that's important because keeping aware or being aware of those customers that you're not serving can be quite useful for innovation. It can be quite useful for identifying ways in which your business can evolve to meet their needs. Okay. And then we have the cost structure. Now, again, that's self-explanatory. It's all about how your costs are occurring. Now, you can get fixed costs, you can get variable costs, you can get one-off costs. You know, for example, installing your kitchen is a one-off cost. Or you can get recurring costs. These are ones that constantly occur. So for example, having someone providing tea and coffee at a concert. I might have a concert again next week, so I'll have the same people in next week and the following week, so on and so forth. That's an example of a recurring cost, okay? And again, there's nothing there I think you wouldn't understand, so very, very basic stuff on cost. And then finally, the revenue. Revenue is how much are your customers willing to pay you. Now that's important because revenue will identify where do you get your money from. Now, again, that can be a one-off fee. So for example, say you are selling water bottles. You sell a water bottle, customer pays you money, that's it, done, you move on. However, sometimes you can get what's called a recurring fee. So you could provide a subscription service. Maybe you are providing facial care or healthcare products. You know, they're consumed within a month, within 2 months, and every 2 months the customer needs to top up or buy some more. Well, you can offer what's called a recurring fee or a subscription fee, which is basically where the customer signs up to a subscription service and you constantly provide them with the product every few months. Okay, these are all examples of revenue streams, revenue forms, ways of you making money. Right, so some tips for doing a business model canvas. So if anyone is looking to use the BMC for their assessment, here are some things you might want to be aware of. My suggestion, print off the BMC on a large surface. It's available through the second link here. So strategizer.com/canvas. You can access a big template that you can print off for free. So www.strategizer.com/canvas. The link is on the screen. You can use this to access for free and download and print for free the business model canvas that I showed you. I would suggest that you discuss the headline points. When I say partners, you might want to group together, work with other people. I don't know, obviously with COVID, it's more difficult. You might not get a chance to, but it's sometimes useful to talk through your thinking with one of your peers, one of your fellow students, just to see if you understood the concept correctly. Just something to bear in mind, the importance of each aspect to your model of the business. So again, depending on what your business does, not all 9 key elements are important, okay? You should still note that, you know, what happens in them, what they mean for your business, but you might find that perhaps you don't have any key partners Maybe you just provide a product by yourself that's not available anywhere else. You don't have any suppliers, so you don't really have any partners. You are a one-man band. That's feasible. So, you know, not all elements are important. There's also a good video on YouTube. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip it. But if you just go to YouTube and type in BMC template or BMC example, there's a few good examples, especially the Amazon one. Someone's done a BMC model for Amazon, and they show you how to apply some of the thinking, some of the concepts. Okay. Right, we will now move on to a SWOT analysis. Again, this tends to be taught in most schools, so I'm sure at some point in your time, either in your previous studies or at school, you've maybe come across a SWOT analysis. So a SWOT analysis essentially looks at your business's strengths and weaknesses, and it also looks at your marketplace threats from competitors. Okay, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That's what SWOT stands for. And again, it can be done both at a micro level and a macro level. So if you're doing it at the micro level, you may wish to focus on a specific department or a specific function or a specific market. You might want to say, you know, how well do we serve our teenage market or student market? So you can do a very, very micro analysis, which is focused. Or you can do what's called a macro analysis, which is, you know, company-wide, which is looking at your overall business. So SWOT analysis can be done either Horizon 1, Horizon 2, or Horizon 3. So there's no real concern whether or not you're looking at long-term or short-term strategy. You can use a SWOT analysis in either of those time horizons. So again, I've just said to you already, this is what SWOT stands for: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this is a short explanation of what each of them mean. How does it all come together? So you will do what's called a 2x2 matrix, so 2x2 grid, and you will dot out your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. Once you've done that, you want to be clear what objective you want to achieve. Now, as I said, you can apply this across Horizon 1, 2, or 3, but if you are doing it for a specific horizon, make it clear, okay? Don't mix and match. You can do across all horizons, but you need to make sure you make it clear where each goal or where each strength, weakness, opportunity, or threat lies. So it's important to note H1, H2, H3, depending on which horizon you're referring to. My advice, either stick to Horizon 3, one horizon, or stick to all, but then put in H1, H2, H3, okay? It's easier to do it that way, because if you do Horizon 1, Horizon 3, miss out Horizon 2, then it's like, okay, what comes in the middle? If you do, you know, them all, but then only have one thing that relates to Horizon 3, well, it's not really fully Horizon 3, is it? So thinking about, either choose one horizon, or if you're going to do them all, make sure you've got a good mix, okay? And make sure you note them as H1, H2, H3, so it's very clear to your examiner what horizon you're looking at. But the best way to do it is ask yourself questions that generate meaningful information. So what do you mean by that? So what are our key strengths? Why are those strengths? What is it about these things that make us a good business? What is it about these things that make us generate more profit? So think about, don't just write the first thing that comes to your head. Think about what are the key strengths of that business that you've chosen to analyze. And similarly with the weaknesses, ask yourself the question, why is it a weakness? What has the business done to try and address it? What can the business do going forward? Because that can be an opportunity, okay? So again, think about asking yourself these questions. Well, what do you do once you've done it? Well, it's not just about making a list, okay? It's all about ordering your list sensibly. Now, this is what I was saying about H1, H2, H3. If you just mix and match, it's not clear to your examiner what you're trying to do. So structure your SWOT analysis, identify what horizon you're referring to, and think about what is the purpose of that strength, what is the purpose of that weakness, what is that opportunity all about, what is that threat all about, okay? So we do what's called matching and converting. So matching is where you match your strengths to identified opportunities. So for example, you might be very, very good at lead time, okay? So all of the people that you sell your products to say you've got the best lead time, you can deliver within a day, within 2 days, whereas everyone else delivers within 5 days, okay? So that's the strength of your business. What are the opportunities? Well, maybe There are certain businesses that are looking for quick turnaround. You know, they don't have a lot of lead time leeway. They prefer to have products just in time. You might identify someone like that. Well, that's an opportunity for you to contact them to understand if they'd be interested in working with you because you've got the shortest lead time. So again, it's about matching your opportunities and your strengths. Converting is where you develop what's called conversion strategies. So what practical steps can you take to turn weaknesses into strengths or to unlock opportunities and address threats? So once you've done that, once you've done your SWOT, it's about thinking, how can I turn my weaknesses into strengths? What needs to happen? What does my business need to do? And similarly, these are some of the opportunities that you've identified that are available to you. How do you take advantage of them? How do you unlock them? And similarly, you've identified some threats that might exist to your business. How do you counteract them? How do you make sure that you've taken steps to ensure these threats don't affect your business? Again, just a little bit more information here. A SWOT analysis isn't perfect. It has its own weaknesses too. It's not the best tool in the world, but it's not the worst either. Every tool has its own weaknesses. These are some of the weaknesses to SWOT that I think you should be aware of. Sometimes what can happen is people fall into a trap of just making a list. Making lists of strengths, lists of weaknesses, lists of opportunities, lists of threats doesn't mean anything on its own unless you can then analyze, unless you can explain how do you turn a weakness into a strength, how do you unlock an opportunity, how do you take advantage of that opportunity and turn it into a strength, how do you address the weakness, how do you address the threat. These are what you need to do from the SWOT analysis. These are the things that pick up the marks, okay? Just doing a SWOT on its own isn't enough. It's the analysis around explaining how you use the SWOT that really generates value for your customer. Lists are presented uncritically. So critical analysis is something that's very, very important, okay? So it's not just about analyzing and describing, it's about being critical. Tell me why it's weakness, tell me what you're going to do, tell me how it affects your business. Be critical, be honest. Don't just sit there and make your strategy seem like it's the best strategy, because it might not be. If you're honest in your appraisal and say, okay, I've come up with this strategy, here are some of the strengths, here are some ways in that how that strategy could be weak, here is how I think we could overcome those weaknesses, here are how it could affect the business. Be honest, okay? Don't just sit there and tell me all the good things. Be more transparent, be more clear about how the strategy could perhaps fail, what you will do to try and mitigate that failure. I want to know this, okay? And finally, there's no clear prioritization. So when people don't tend to prioritize, they don't show me which one's Horizon 1, which one's Horizon 2, they don't tend to have any real structure to their SWOT analysis, then that's a problem as well. Cool. I was going to say let's take a break, but we will just skip that. What you can then do, now don't worry about this, this is very much next level and you don't have to do this for your assignment, but it's just something that you might want to look at further. You can do what's called a TOWS matrix. So it's just SWOT backwards, okay? So what you do here is you come up with strategies based on this. So combining your threats and weaknesses, you come up with what are called mini strategies. So these are strategies that are designed to minimize threats, minimize weaknesses, okay? So mini strategies. You might combine strengths and threats to come up with what's called maxi-mini strategies. So it's maximizing your strengths and minimizing your threats. These are known as maxi-mini strategies. You might combine weaknesses and opportunities to come up with what's called mini-maxi strategies. So these are minimizing weaknesses and maximizing opportunities. And then finally, you might combine strengths and opportunities to maximize your strengths and maximize your opportunities. Okay, so this can help you provide structure to your answer. So it might be something you may wish to consider. But again, it's not compulsory, but it's just an additional thing you might want to consider if you are doing the SWOT analysis for your assessment. Right, next, let's look at PESTEL analysis. Again, I'm sure some of you will have heard of the tool PESTEL. Basically, it helps you understand the big picture of the external environment in which your business operates. So if we're comparing SWOT and PESTEL, SWOT is very much looking internally. It's looking at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, your threats, but what's happening inside your business. PESTEL is about outside, okay? It's all about the external analysis. What is happening in the market? How does it affect what you do? So what does PESTEL stand for? So the P stands for political. So political can be things to do with the government and the stability of the government. It can be do with things like interest groups in the country, regulations or deregulations, the freedom of the press, levels of bureaucracy. It can be tax policies, trade-offs and contractual stuff. It can be social and employment legislation. So political environment is very much your political variable, okay? That's what you're looking at under the P. For economic, you're looking at economic variables. That can be stuff around perhaps the different stages of the business cycle. How does, when you're going through your growth, what's important? How are taxes applied? How does economic growth of the country look? If the country is GDP growing, are people going to be buying products? So these are all important areas. The interest rates, the inflation rates, and economic growth, we mentioned already. The unemployment and the supply of labor. So again, if your product's very technical and you're looking for people that are highly educated or highly specialized, you're likely not to go to a country where there's low levels of education, because you want to have human resources that are educated, that are expertise, that are very, very good at what they do. So you're likely to go to a country where there is high level of resources available, or high level of educated resources. Stuff like labor costs, what's the minimum wage, how much you have to pay. Unemployment, we talked about already. Distribution of income, how is the country's economic makeup? Are lots and lots of people poor and a few minority rich? Is there a better balance? What does the country makeup look like? Where are you going to be able to attract most customers for your product? These are all decisions that are important. Social variables, here you're looking at culture. You're looking at organizational culture, you're looking at education, occupation, you're looking at ethical issues, you're looking at media views, laws, you're looking at demographics such as age, gender, race, your family size, etc. So what does the country makeup look like, the social capacity of a country? The T stands for technology. So here you're looking at how mature is the technology. So for example, in the UK, we're now on 5G network, as is most of Europe and America, Australia. But there's some parts of the developing world, countries in Asia, countries in some parts of Africa, etc. They don't quite have the same infrastructure. So again, technology can impact your business decision. Technology access, again, not everyone in the country has access to technology, particularly in poorer countries. So again, if you're a digital business running on platforms, running online, if your customers don't have access to IT, don't have access to computers, don't have access to the internet, how are they going to be able to buy your products? Transportation, energy uses, sources, fuels, and all other things. So all the logistical things can also fall into technology, okay? So it's about making sure that you've chosen, or your market corresponds to the needs of your business. L stands for legal, so it's quite similar to the political stuff, but this is more looking at legislation. It's looking at international legislation. It's looking at environmental stuff. It's looking at consumer law. It's looking at industry-specific regulations, competition rules. So it's not necessarily about the government, it's about the wider regulation. So governments can change, but these rules are separate to the government, okay? The government might try to make changes to this rule, but these rules apply to everyone. These are standard rules, laws applied across the UN, applied across the EU, applied across global trading standards. These are laws that really any one government can't change on their own. So it's not quite political, it falls into legal. And then we have what's called environmental. Now this is looking at stuff around the ecology. It's about looking at, greenhouse gas emissions. It's about looking at how, if a country is very, very particular about looking after the environment, taking care of the planet, and you're trying to set up a chemical plant, or you're trying to set up a nuclear plant, then let's be honest, there's going to be a lot of backlash. You're going to struggle to do that because pressure groups, people will complain. So it can be difficult. So environment is important for you to take into consideration because it affects customer values, it affects stakeholder interests, and there's also usually regulation involved too. Porter's 5 forces. So Porter's 5 forces you may or may not have heard of. Michael E. Porter is the scholar behind this. So what it does, it helps you to analyze the immediate environment. It's all about finding a position within the industry where the company can best defend itself against the competitive forces or influence them in its favor. So how does it do that? Well, firstly, Michael Porter. A little bit about him. Born in 1947, he's been professor in Harvard Business School. He introduced what's called the 5 forces model in his doctoral thesis. And since then, he's written over 18 books and over 100, and now I believe 37 practitioner and academic articles. So a very, very clever man. But he came up with this, okay? Porter's 5 forces. So we've got threat of new entrants, we've got bargaining power of customers, threat of substitutes, bargaining power of suppliers, and the combination of this coming up with what's called a competitive rivalry within an industry. So why are these important? Let's explore that in the next slide. So firstly, threat of new entrants. So threat of new entrants is basically where we try to understand how easy is it for new businesses to enter the market and compete with us. Okay, so if you're in a market area where you're the only one providing a good or service, hooray, it's amazing. You're the only business, you're the only one they can buy from. However, very, very quickly, someone else might look to join, then someone else. So all of a sudden, your market share is being reduced because there's more players in the market. So you want to understand how easy is it for another business to join your market. So threat of new entrants is quite important to you. There's an example here of McDonald's. Again, something for you to look at. Okay, I won't go over it in detail, but if you're trying to compete against McDonald's, I wish you the very best of luck. McDonald's is probably the biggest franchise in the world in fast food. And yes, the likes of KFC, etc. also exist, but McDonald's continues to be the largest driver in the fast food market. You know, the level of profits, the market share they hold is greater than any other fast food outlet. So competing against McDonald's is very, very, very difficult. Entry barriers. So here is how, if you are deciding to enter a market, what barriers do you face? Okay, what retaliation might there be to your wanting to enter the market? So there can usually be what we call a price to enter. So you might have to invest in new technologies. You might have to change your business because the regulations in that country say that, you know, you can only set up a subsidiary. You can't set up your own enterprise. You have to get into a franchise agreement. You have to partner with a local organization. So these are all things that you might want to consider as part of your business. Buyer power. So buyer power essentially looks at things like the extent to which an industry's customers have the power to dictate the price, the quality, and the standard of product. Okay, so buyer power is the customer have. Now again, the customer will have more power if there's lots and lots of suppliers. So, you know, if I'm looking to buy a new mobile phone, for example, now, sorry, can whoever that is going to mute, please? You're making it difficult for the rest of your peers to hear. Thank you. Sorry. So buyer power looks very much at how easy it is for you as a business to serve the needs of your customer. As I was saying, if I was in the market for a new mobile phone, there's lots and lots of suppliers. You know, there's Apple, there's Samsung, there is now emerging businesses. You know, Huawei from Asia. You have obviously Nokia is dying, but you know, Sony are in the market still as well. You have lots and lots of other companies too, HTC, but they're kind of dead now. But you've also got like Xiaomi in China. They're starting to become bigger and bigger. So all these different brands. Who has the power? At the end of the day, the customer. Because there's so many options, the customer can shop around. The customer can say, well, hold on a minute. I can get a similar specification of phone from a cheaper supplier. Why should I pay you this much money? Okay, so how much power does the buyer have in the market is something that's important. And these are just some of the things I've just discussed right there. Supplier power. Now this looks at it from the opposite perspective. How much power does a supplier have? So again, I used the example earlier that if your business is based on, you know, supplies, you're sourcing raw materials to make the product. So you're looking at getting those raw materials from somewhere else. If there's only ever one other company making that product, then you have a problem because that supplier has a lot of power over you. Because if they go bust or if they raise their prices, what you're meant to do, you have to pay the price. Or if they go bust, where are you going to source the product from? Okay, so supplier power is a very, very big thing. If the more suppliers are in the market, the more power you have. The less suppliers you have, the more power they have, because they know that they can hold you over a barrel. Again, some questions that you might want to consider as part of supplier power. If you're doing a Porter's 540 analysis, these are the kinds of questions I'll be looking for you to answer as part of your analysis. And finally, substitutes. These are the goods and services that serve a similar function. So these are goods and services that do pretty much what your product does, but maybe not in the same way. Okay, so for example, if I want to buy a new camera, okay, to take pictures, I need a new camera. Nowadays, mobile phones also have very, very good cameras. So I might identify a 48 megapixel camera that's available on the market for £500. But then I might discover that I can buy a mobile phone that has the same 48 megapixel camera for £600. So I might think to myself, well, why don't I just buy a mobile phone? Because I need one of those later on. I can get the phone and the camera together for £600, or just a camera for £500. So this is where you think about substitutes. What can you substitute your product for? Okay, so things that carry the same function as a product or service, or dissimilar items that fulfill the same psychological need. So again, a mobile phone and a camera are two very different things, but they fulfill my need. I wanted a 48 megapixel camera. I walked away with a new mobile phone, but that mobile phone delivers me a 48 megapixel camera. Okay, so that's what I mean by substitutes. So with substitutes, we're thinking about things like price, thinking about things like quality. We're thinking about how many close substitutes are there for your products. How likely is it that your product can be substituted for others? And again, some of the things you might want to consider. The danger that's posed if substitute offer better value for money. So again, the mobile phone, yes, it's more expensive. I have to pay an extra £100, but for that extra £100, I get the ability to connect to the internet, to use text messages, to phone people. You know, I've got a handheld mobile device, easy to carry, you know, that kind of stuff. So is it worth my time? Is it something that gives me more value for my money? What are the switching costs? So again, for me, paying an extra £100 for that mobile phone with the 48 megapixel camera was worth the money. For you, it might not be, or for someone else, they might say, no, I'd rather pay £500 for the standalone camera. So that means, you know, it's about the individual switching costs. And then finally, the combination of those four forces that we've talked come up with the fifth one. And the fifth one is all about the intensity of the rivalry among your existing competitors. What is that rivalry like? How close are the competitors that exist in that industry? How much do they compete? How much do they collude? How much do they work together? How much do they work against each other? Okay, what is the rivalry like in the market? And again, the example going back to fast food is a good one because the rivalry is very, very strong. Okay, I said already that McDonald's is the biggest, but then you've got Burger King, you've got KFC, you've got Pizza Hut, you've got Subway, you've got Domino's, you've got other fast food outlets as well now. These are all very, very fiercely competitive places that are trying to compete for the same or similar market share. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop there because the next section is quite long and we only have 15 minutes left, so I don't really want to start